You might be thinking this story is about a kind of hell on Earth. But no, it's not what you expect. I actually live in a town called Hell. Yes, that's the real name. It's a small, quiet place in Michigan, northwest of Ann Arbor. You can even visit it if you're curious. Anyway, my name is Richard. I'm an electrical engineer, and I work at a university. The physics professors there often come up with strange and fascinating ideas, and my job is to take those ideas and turn them into something real. It's not always easy, but I'll get back to that later. I was married. Her name was Karen. She was my wife, but that chapter of my life is now closed. For now, let's leave it at that. One of the more unusual projects I worked on recently was both exciting and challenging. It involved one of the more eccentric professors in the physics department. Yes, they know I call them that. This particular professor had an odd idea. He wanted to measure low-frequency fluctuations coming from the sun. Why? I honestly don't know. But he was determined, and it was my job to make it happen. So I began the work from home, spending time in the garden and enjoying life with Karen. But then came the challenge. The frequencies we needed to observe were so low that it required uninterrupted data collection for several weeks. In ideal conditions, you could gather 12 hours of data per day, but doing that for weeks without a break, practically impossible. Well, unless you're at the South Pole. Down there, the sun stays above the horizon continuously during the summer. And so began my expedition to the coldest, most remote place imaginable. You've heard the phrase, when hell freezes over? Well, this was it. I've heard that line more times than I can count, living in a town called Hell. And let me tell you, our winters are brutal. Ice, snow, bitter cold. But even that couldn't prepare me for what was coming. When the time came, I left my warm bed, said goodbye to my warm wife, and began the long journey south. First stop, Hawaii, a quick break in the tropics. From there, I flew to New Zealand, where the National Science Foundation organizes flights to Antarctica. I spent a week learning how to survive at the South Pole. And with every training session, the place seemed more and more unwelcoming. Finally, when the weather allowed, we flew to McMurdo Station, and then on to the South Pole itself. I was to spend 3 weeks there, living in a tiny, temporary settlement. Half of us, including me, slept in heated tents. That's right, I lived in a tent. At the South Pole, with daylight 24 hours a day, I immediately got to work. I had to build and fine-tune a very sensitive telescope that could track the sun from such an unusual location on Earth. I also had to set up a data transfer system. Normally, that would have been easy, but down there, everything takes 3 times as long. Despite the harsh conditions, this was an experience I'll never forget. And while I worked, a wonderful woman was waiting for me back home. Karen and I stayed in touch through email. She sent me letters, and I replied with short messages, just enough to let her know I was safe. Most days were the same. I built the telescope, ate with the crew, and slept in the tent. The next day, same thing. Over and over. By the way, guess which movie is the most popular down there? John Carpenter's The Thing. I'm not kidding. 3 weeks later, the project was finished. I hadn't heard from Karen for 3 days, but I was heading home. That alone gave me comfort. I reached Auckland, New Zealand, and spent a few days warming up, literally. I visited the beach, soaked up the sun, and slowly thawed out. After being frozen for so long, I had to make sure my fingers, and even my teeth, were still intact. At the South Pole, losing feeling becomes a scary thing. You start to wonder if you'll ever get it back. But as I enjoyed the sunshine, a strange feeling crept in. Karen hadn't written. And now, I was starting to feel uneasy. After 3 full days in the New Zealand sun, I headed home. I contacted the university and asked someone to reach out to Karen. I thought she deserved to know they'd never met Karen, but I still asked the university staff to try contacting her while I was flying home. Most of the time during the flight, I simply rested, thinking about what it would be like to finally be home again. I had a short stopover in Hawaii, which I usually would have enjoyed. But this time, all I could think about was getting back to my wife, hugging her, and crawling into my own bed. Instead, what I came back to was far from comforting. My return was anything but peaceful. It was the start of something much darker. I landed in Detroit and made my way slowly to baggage claim. Secretly, I was hoping to see Karen at the security checkpoint. Maybe just a quick glimpse, a smile, a wave. But she wasn't there. Calling it a disappointment would be putting it mildly. Before I left for Antarctica, I'd been overwhelmed with work. Karen had seemed a bit distant too. I figured that 5 weeks apart might actually help us reconnect, help us remember what really mattered. Then, suddenly, Gail showed up. She and her husband Jack weren't just friends, they were family to us. It wasn't unusual for them to drop by, no call or invitation needed. Sometimes they'd just walk in with a gentle knock on the door, and we'd all sit around in the living room or on the porch. When I saw Gail step into the house, I felt a strange mix of happiness and unease. I gave her a hug, kissed her cheek, and asked, "Where's Karen?" I haven't heard from her in over a week. Her expression shifted ever so slightly. She seemed to choose her words carefully. Then she smiled, gently, almost sadly, and said Karen couldn't come. Instead, she had come alone. She placed her hand softly on mine. "I'm just glad to see you. And I'm glad you made it home safely." Sure, it had been an adventure, but not one I'd ever want to repeat. It wasn't exciting. It was brutally cold and endlessly repetitive. Gail chuckled a little at my comment. "Well, thank God you didn't lose your sense of humor," she said. But her eyes lingered on mine longer than they needed to, like she was trying to say something without saying it. "Let's get your luggage," she finally said. And so we did. Later, as we sat down for a cup of coffee before heading to the car, I asked, "So, what happened while I was gone?" She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. Her eyes locked onto mine with a heavy kind of sadness. She didn't try to dodge the question. After a pause, she said, "I don't know how to tell you this. The apple trees you planted behind the garage, they didn't survive." "What do you mean they're gone?" I asked. "Apple trees don't just disappear. There was a fire," she said. "They burned." "Burned? But there was snow on the ground." "Yes," she nodded. "But the fire was intense. Too intense." I stared at her. "What do you mean, fire? How does a fire start behind the garage?" "It didn't start behind the garage," she said quietly. "The garage itself caught fire. The flames spread. The apple trees were engulfed." "How bad was it?" "It's completely gone," she said softly. "My Mustang, it was in there. I'm so sorry." The garage collapsed on it. The fire destroyed everything. I felt numb. My apple trees, my garage, my car, all wiped out. "I'm afraid that's not all," Gail said. "When the fire trucks came to put out the flames, they had to drive over your front yard. The flower garden you cared for all those years, it's gone too." I shook my head in disbelief. "How did the fire even reach the garage?" She looked at me steadily. "Because the flames came from the house." "What are you saying?" "The house caught fire too." I could barely speak. "Is it damaged?" "No," she said. "It's gone. Burned to ash." My house had burned down. "It wasn't really a fire," she continued. "It was more like an explosion." "Explosion?" "Yes. When the house exploded, the garage caught fire right after. Everything was destroyed so quickly." "What caused the explosion?" "There was a gas leak," she said. "A small spark was enough." My mind was racing. How did the gas leak happen? What was Karen doing? Gail took a breath. Not so much what she did in the house, but where she was. She was in the bedroom when it happened. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I closed my eyes and looked at Gail, hesitating before I asked the next question. She was shaking. I reached over, took her hand, and waited. When she finally spoke again, her voice was steady. Too steady. "While you were away," she said, "Jack was helping Karen around the house. There was always something that needed fixing. First it was a dent, then a clogged drain, then a leaking water pipe. There were always little things to do around the house. Clearing the sidewalk, carrying down boxes from the attic. Karen often needed help, and Jack was always willing to lend a hand. I stopped by too sometimes. But on that particular day, I had to go into the office. I finished early and headed to my house shortly after the explosion. Looking back, it's clear how close I came to dying. Gas doesn't explode right away. It builds up slowly. Gil was trying to say just that. The gas had been accumulating for a while. We sat in silence, both of us lost in thought. I couldn't shake the feeling. It had been over a week since I'd heard anything from Karen. Something didn't feel right. Slowly, I began to realize that I hadn't just been worried about Karen and Jack being in the house. I'd been worried about them being in the house together. Gail's face briefly twisted in anger, and I could tell she was reliving that day too. She had walked in as usual, no knocking, just like we always did. That's how close we all were. As soon as she stepped inside, she heard something. She climbed the stairs quietly, up to the bedroom, and there she found them, my wife and her husband, in the middle of it, like wild animals. Jack was using his tongue on her. And Karen? She encouraged it. She wanted it. Gail looked at me and said, "You wouldn't believe it." But I did, because I had already seen it. I had my phone on me that day. I had recorded it. And now Gail showed me hers. Her phone. And there it was again, right in front of me. My closest friend. My wife. Together. Laughing. They said disgusting things. Jack called me a mindless cuckold. Karen called me a stupid idiot. And they laughed. Through the whole thing, I was frozen in place, filled with a pain I can't put into words. Gail's face showed the same. Then Jack started calling me a lazy sack. That made Karen laugh even harder. Her laughter, that hurt even more than the words. The betrayal. The cruelty. I never thought either of them could treat me like this. Not her. Not him. Gail and I just sat there, shaken to our core. She was about to break down, and I was already broken. They hadn't even noticed Gail. It was like we were invisible. Like garbage. I turned and walked away, back toward the front door. As I passed through the kitchen, I saw the gas stove Karen had once been so proud of. I turned on all 5 burners and let the water flow over the flames. When the flames went out, the gas kept flowing. Gail stared at me in silence. She knew what I had done. I didn't speak. The video was already over. But the hatred I felt, that was just beginning. It was pure. It was deep. It was something I had never experienced before. That's what cheating does to a man. It strips him of his pride, of his self-worth, until there's nothing left but hate. I sat in silence for another hour, head down, completely hollow. In a single moment, everything I knew had collapsed. Gail reached out and gently took my hand. "Come to my place," she said. "I'll make you dinner. I'll take care of you. And tomorrow, you'll feel better." As we walked to her car, she held my arm tightly. Her other hand wrapped around mine. "You can go to the police tomorrow morning," she said softly. "Do what you have to do. I won't hold it against you, I promise. Just," she paused, "swear to me that tonight, you'll sleep in my bed. Just one night. I need that. They took everything from us. Our dignity, our trust, our love. Let me give back just a little of what they stole. I need to feel wanted again. Just once. Even if it's only for one night." We took a few more steps. Then she turned to me with a sad smile. "I'm not made of stone." Her eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry. "Gail, you're the kindest woman I've ever met. And the strongest." Karen and Jack? They were nothing but shameless liars. Their opinions meant nothing now. As we got to the car, something occurred to me. The explosion. I didn't regret it. Not even a little. I'd lost a cheating wife. A backstabbing friend. But the rest, insurance would cover it. A new car? That was no problem. But those apple trees. I'd miss them the most.